How soon is too soon in approaching 2026? People, it seems, of the mega variety, one of their main grievances or gripes that was maybe personified by Donald J. Trump is that, people are too precious, and there are these norms where why can't we just say whatever we're feeling at all times? That there is this, it's part of wrapped up in liberalism or being uh, too polite, which is a strange grievance. Uh, People learn how to behave as from their parents, from their pastor, their priest, their rabbi, their imam, their teachers. A lot of the weight is carried by the teachers. But when did it become, he asked rhetorically, when did it become un-American to be cordial to one another? When did it become unacceptable to have a reasonable expectation that your cordiality will be returned in kind? I seem to remember something that sounds a lot like uh, do unto others as you would have them do to or for you. Um, I'm a failed theologian and Catholic and a lot of other things, but that is when I was in the 1960s, when I was a very young person. If I ever had an idea that I would use vulgarity towards another human being for whatever reason, then my mother's answer to that sort of behavior was, I hope you like the taste of soap. And I got so familiar with the taste that I was hoping that it was an ivory day as opposed to a dial or a safeguard day. Because when you use vulgarity, your parents, in that generation, in that time, at least in my experience, I was going to say humble, but nothing humble about it. There were consequences for behaving in a way that is inconsistent with the teachings of your parents while you are still a minor. Now, you get older, you go through high school, you make more mature friends, have more mature relationships, and things change somewhat. But certainly, the level of vulgarity regarding race, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, the level of vitriol and hate speech around those particular issues is elevated now, and certainly it's DJT and the quote unquote permission structure that he allows or encourages amongst his cult followers, and suggests that those that aren't in on the joke are oppressive or can't take a joke. J.D. Vance, when that group of conservative, young conservative party leaders that he dismissed when they were saying vile, racist, anti-Semitic things. J.D. Vance tried to write that off as kids being kids. And of course, some of these men, because I believe they were all men, were well into their 30s, professional people with families, and they weren't kids, and they were responsible for their own actions, and they deserved to be, slapped back into place. And of course, JD and DJT are unwilling to do that because the worst animal instincts of the MAGA GOP work in favor of their continued candidacy and power. Because if they were to be governed not by nicety, but by decency, then they wouldn't be able to behave the way that they do. And people in their own party and in their own sphere and their wives and children would feel more free to speak to them and help them tone things down. So, and I'm not a pacifist. I am not somebody who shies away from sometimes using vulgar language. It's one of my faults that I sin. But also when you are writing and creating content and speaking to groups of people, and sometimes the the best word, the mot juste, the most effective way to communicate is sometimes to place an emphasis that really, that can sometimes shock or direct attention at a particular point. You can argue that it's lazy, as Mr. McDonald, my seventh grade English teacher, was fond of saying. I was reading, and I posted something last evening. As I do every night, I have one final thought that's usually a quote or a poem or something like that I put out there just because it was something that I encountered during that day. And Mr. McDonald, the English teacher, because I was at that age, at age 11, when I was in seventh grade. I was in school in northern Massachusetts, where I am now. And, Robert Frost is a poet that seems to speak to, the woods and the snow and kind of a New England vibe. So I think of Mr. McDonald often because he taught me a lot about language and the importance of language and the power of it, the power to communicate effectively, and again at a young age. But he was crusty old dude with a pipe that lived on a boat, and language is power. Language is how you share ideas with other people. If you have, like many people who grow up in Europe and Asia and other parts of the world, you are also blessed generally with more than one language, which is a blessing. I have English, and I have half of three or four other languages, but only half. And the longer I spend away from Miami and Venezuela, up here in northern Mass, what I affectionately refer to as Gringoland, the worse my Spanish gets, and I'm forever bothering the shit out of Uber drivers and other people that I meet in my daily life. But for the subject of today's essay, the too soon, what made me think about that earlier today was the young woman that resigned from the Mamdani campaign within this week. I don't remember what day after the the Providence, Sydney, Syria killings, and that doesn't take into account a few school shootings that because we're in the United States and can't do even common sense uh, gun control and reform, that happens. It's like another day at the beach. But it made me think of this woman who is 33. Um, I think her name is DaCosta. I may butcher the name, but let's say that I'm right for once. And she was on board with the Mamdani transition team in a role that would have been called HR, but her specific title was something like onboarding or something to that effect. And I apologize, I don't have her title, but she chose to resign because social media posts from earlier in her life were brought to light. They slipped through vetting, and they came to light only after she had accepted the position with Mr. Mamdani's campaign. And she made comments that said various things that were anti-Semitic in nature. She made a comment about a particular branch of the public transit system. I think it was the Far Rockaway line as being. I think she referred to it as the Jew train, if you'll excuse me. And she made another comment within the same 2-year period that said something to the effect of SMH, which is what the kids say, and shaking my head like in disbelief, and then something about uh, the the influence of the Jewish community, particularly the Jewish community that was more affluent. Um, so uh, the the exact attribution, I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but I think you might get the general idea. It was could certainly be classified as anti-Semitic, and it would be classified if it were aimed at people that worship a another religion. It would be a racist comment. Now, what I found interesting and made me this is not I'm not making a statement of position. It's more a question for our time. When I was talking to a remarkably brilliant and young person that is at times related to me earlier today, I was asking her about whether she had heard of this particular statement and when what is the what is an acceptable period of time from a mistake, the time elapsed from a mistake to the time that people could reasonably forgive one for such a mistake. Now, Mr. Mamdani, famously, has made statements about the treatment of Gazans, people from Gaza, and other Muslim minority communities that he felt were mistreated by either Israel or by other groups, and that dates back. Now, Mr. Mamdani is a young man. This woman is about, I believe, 33, and she made these comments that were that I misquoted, but I know because I did the math earlier, and I'm not dead yet. That it was essentially a statement that was half a life away from where she is now. So let's say that she is 33, 34 now, and she made the statements when she was 18 or 19. Not exactly half a life, but you get the drift. So if somebody made statements when they are 18 or 19 years old, and I would not, I'm very happy that there was not Twitter and those sorts of things when I was that age. Because uh, speech that was that did not comport with what I expected of myself, according to my upbringing, my self image, and the way that I was taught, and what I learned and what I've read. Those just went at that point into when I was that age, the same age as this young person. I was perhaps I was voting the first and only time, except for one exception, for a Republican candidate in the person of Ronald Reagan. So it was a long time ago. What are the things that I said at that point that were harsh, upsetting, not not racist statements? Certainly, because of where I grew up, with whom, and so on. Not anti-Semitic statements, but I'm human. I made mistakes. You made mistakes, and this young woman, still young, in her early 30s, and Mr. Mamdani, about the same age, mid 30s, whatever he is. You make mistakes when you're young. You learn from them. Mr. Mamdani's criticism of if he was criticizing Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli government for the treatment of children in Gaza, then he has very good standing to do so. Any reasonable human being would agree with that. If you don't, I got nothing for you. You need to check in with your faith leader soon, stat, ASAP. But did the campus behavior at some of the elite universities that was when there was anti-Semitic language used towards Jewish students by Islamic students or other students, is that forgivable? I would argue that it is, if it's not a persistent hate crime that students, one of the greatest sins that the Trump administration and the Republican Congress is in the midst of right now, and they're not done, is hurting elite institutions of education, the Ivies, state schools, universities in general, and limiting speech is a grave mistake. It's inexcusable, and it will have long-lasting repercussions. And one of the things that young people are supposed to learn when they're in that environment is how to debate and argue, not fight, not physical violence, but you can vehemently disagree with somebody else and talk it out or scream it out, have a civil discussion, or have a less than civil argument in the public square where you are, uh, your blood pressure is up, uh, what used to be called hackles, you are fully exercised about a particular statement that somebody else made, then that public square, kind of going back to something I was talking about yesterday with the founding of our nation and the soapbox and standing in front of Faneuil Hall Marketplace before the jackbooted ICE agents started showing up there, and just getting up and say, I'm throwing all the British tea in the harbor, and if any of the soldiers don't like it, I'm tossing them in too, because this is our country and they got to get out. If maybe you read about it, but there was, the word revolutionary was invented before the Revolutionary War. But that wasn't an argument that got out of hand. I think it's probably better to say that it had to reach a particular level or tipping point, to quote an overquoted author, in order to have the desired outcome. That you couldn't have passive discussions over years and years and years without any progress. You had to stand for your rights against an oppressive regime. And that's maybe what many of us, including myself, feel we are doing now in the country, is that those that would silence us, the very same people that complained about that particular un-American practice of shouting down protest, which is just hypocritical. But calling the Republican Party hypocritical right now is just it's a little bit too softball. They are aiding and abetting a criminal organization in the executive branch of the government and doing nothing. So they're bringing disrepute to their community, their constituents, their families, their children, their grandchildren, and even the masseuse that caught them on tape. It's an embarrassment. John Roberts, embarrassment. Clarence Thomas, ridiculous. Sammy Samolito, bad. Kavanaugh stops. Oh, I can't go down that. I can't do that today. That just makes me. Kavanaugh stops. I think on a top 10 list, that's way up there for this year, just because he knows better, and he did it anyways because he's just one of the guys shooting hoops down at the gym. So fuck that. Yeah. So back to too soon. Can we? And I use the expression more now. The idea of giving grace to somebody who made a mistake. It's important now because there's just a lot of tension, and it's important that you make an an outward public display of grace. I think about, on this platform, somebody like Father David. That if you don't follow him on this platform, you're missing out. Um, James Tallarico, the the gentleman from Texas, the legislator from Texas, people that speak about grace. And I would say that if somebody has made a mistake, and even if they don't realize it in the moment, that if they have been on the planet for 34 years and not half of their life, which old school math would be, I think, something like 17 years, but for the last 15 years, they have behaved with distinction. And even for this particular lady, who I don't know, apparently she is also married to a Jewish gentleman. Not that it matters. That doesn't correct. That's correction. She stated that she has children that are being raised in the Jewish faith. And ordinarily, that means that their mother is Jewish. But whatever. She is not completely disconnected with the Jewish community in New York, and so she apologized and resigned, so not to allow her statements to disrupt the orderly transition for Mr. Mondani, who, I mean, if he has an orderly transition with all of the anti-Semitism on one side, but the Islamophobia that is going to continue to be fired at him with bazookas and fire hoses, figurative bazookas, um, because that hasn't stopped and it ain't going to stop. But I would, at another time, when maybe she was appointed earlier in the transition, would it be, I mean, just when he was elected 5, 6 weeks ago, something like that. Could she have gone to someone in the Jewish community in Queens, where she Dominican woman? Could she have gone to faith leaders in Queens and spoken with them and talked about the mistakes that she made 15 years before? And because maybe she would have been granted grace and been able to move on with her professional life. This is not going to destroy her because, um, unfortunately, DJT has kneecapped the ability of anybody to feel shame because he is incapable of doing it. And I am not suggesting that that role model of the paragon of virtue that is Donald J. Trump should in any way convince us that we need to change who we are, but we have to take the world a little bit as we find it right now. And if the world is telling us that we have to be a little bit more permissive of hotter language without being insulting, denigrating, but if that's where we are pointing as a society, as a country, as a hemisphere, okay, give grace, forgive those that, if somebody is saying again and again and again, or behaving. Mr. What's his name? Gregory Bovino, yeah, the non-ice, but the other guy that likes seeing his picture in the newspapers, is behaving in ways that are not race neutral daily, and delighting in that fact. Stephen Miller delighting in that behavior. Donald J. Trump delighting in that behavior. J.D. Vance, although he says otherwise, just saying so does not cure the actual behavior. And we talked about this yesterday. Just two more kind of short examples, and I'll try to make this more or manageable length today. There was gentleman that was in Trump 1.0 whose name was, not Ghibli, but there was a gentleman that was in charge of a minor agency in the Trump administration. And he went on podcasts and disparaged, took the all in approach and said things to denigrate the LGBTQ community, Blacks, Muslims, and two or three other diverse communities. Not in very stark language. When he was asked about it, he tendered his resignation, and he said that I don't hate I don't hate Muslims. I don't trust them. You know. And he resigned and he moved on. And you think somebody like that now, however many, we'll call that 7.5 years later, and Trump 2.0, somebody like that would probably have a wing at a museum named after him or her, because that sort of course. Just look at the way that Mario Little, our Secretary of State, Little Marco, Pamela Joe Bondi, Pistol Pete Hegseth. Look at the way that they address members of Congress. Coarse, rude, but it's part of the game plan for them because that's disruptive. And what their goal is by the Project 2025 game plan is to reduce trust and reverence for institutions, because if they do that, if they erode trust in the institutions, then their anti-democratic behavior and their assaults on elections and such other things. What's going on with RFK Jr., which is just dangerous, reprehensible. Marco Rubio standing up and saying that there's no evidence of anybody dying due to the USAID cuts. There's evidence of 6 figures of people that would still be alive if not for those cuts already, and we're less than 1 year into the administration. So that he can just take that bullshit and put it somewhere on Calle Ocho, wherever, store that in Hialeah, young man. Yeah. Good. All roads to Havana lead through Caracas, and I'm marching down that road and killing as many innocent people as I can, because there are no guardrails, because of the pardon power of the president. It's absolutely it's despicable, and it's not America, but it is the Trump administration. The one last example that will actually turn into a book recommendation as if you need to give a last minute gift idea, because I have two little book lists that I have been threatening to post to the feed. And as I mentioned a week ago, at least, when I put together a list like this, I feel compelled to go back and reread books, which I do on audio because I can't see. Well, uh, and I get caught up in the books. If I'm recommending them, I enjoyed them, which means I got something out of them. And maybe I read them 3 years ago and I forget one particular part of the book. So I'm all in. I've got it. That's why I'm listening. And my better half, she's, like, uh, gonna wear that freaking ear, you've been there. So the last, of the too soon, references is Jesse Jackson, the good Reverend is still with us. He is reportedly uh, having he is 84 or 5, and I believe battling Parkinson's disease. Reverend Jesse Jackson, right? Yeah, for kids, he ran for president in '84, right? That was Reagan 2.0, and Jesse Jackson was in every single part of his life with dignity, leadership, and the idea of a community organizer and not grouping two black gentlemen together because of their skin color. But if you think of what one of the many people besides John Lewis and Dr. King that may have inspired Barack Obama, another Chicagoan, might have been Jesse Jackson, because he was one of the most consequential community organizers of his time, and God bless him, his time is still now. In 1984, and then it gets back also to the too soon is it too soon thing in 2026 context. Half a lifetime ago, assuming that I have my math correct, and the good Reverend is 84. So let's give me a nice round number, and so we'll say that about 42 years ago, when he was in politics in earnest, he made an unfortunate comment about New York, um, brought about by his frustration in dealing with certain members of the New York community. And he said he referred to New York as Town. If you'll excuse me, an expression even older than I have, but Jaime is a derogatory term for a Jewish, I believe, just male. But so I would say unfortunate. It wasn't unfortunate. It was wrong. It was insulting. It was denigrating. It was not something that a man of God, a bona fide, not a charlatan, but a bona fide reverend man of God, to say in the heat, even in the heat of battle, He said it. He apologized, and he moved on. It it didn't. Whether it stayed with him the rest of his life to today, you'll have to ask people perhaps in the Jewish community in New York City, because that perhaps was where that comment hurt the most, because that was the context 40 more than 4 decades ago when that happened. The man has lived a not a faultless life, not a perfect life, like all of us, flawed sinners, or just do stupid shit, which is in the sin category, I guess. But we're human. We make mistakes. And Reverend Jackson made a big one on that day, 42 years ago. Can we let it go? Particularly in light of how people are suffering. Civil rights movement in the United States, there were lynchings. There is still incredible cruelty in directed towards uh, members of the Black and brown communities in this country and around the world. There is institutional racism. So when the John Roberts Court talks about post-racial or time limits on Voting Rights Act, the VRA, and things like that, you ain't reading the right newspaper and books if you're reading anything, justices, because we ain't there yet, you know. But as individual human beings, we can forgive, if not forget. We can forgive and allow, particularly a young person who said something half of their lifetime ago and still needs to live, learn, earn, provide for family, and move forward. We can give grace and move forward. So that is too soon, and it is my pleasure. Oh, book recommendation. So I'll drop it. Let me drop something in because I've made a promise to my my boss to keep this short. I'm going to do a single drop in. I'm sorry, Abby Phillips' book about Dr. King. Abby, who is, I don't envy her the job that she has to do as a lion tamer. That the show, that format for me, I'm a huge fan of hers before I read this book about Dr. King. I'm a bigger fan of hers after reading the book. It was, it's a magnificent book about a consequential figure in American politics, but there are some very specific lessons that we can take away as a Democratic Party regrouping and trying to figure out how uh, to do some of the old school political organizing, the getting back to basics on how to connect with people that we may have lost in the last election. Obviously, if they voted for Trump, then they're lost and or fallen. But how do we reconnect with voters like that and somebody the good Reverend that spent his entire life connecting with other human beings for community service related functions and political functions, and leading worship and all of the beautiful things that he did and hopefully still does. But a brilliant man and a, a very important time frame as he was coming up, through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And, he was facing off against parties in transition from LBJ through Carter and through Ronald Reagan and into the 90s and connecting with Bill Clinton. He was a consequential leader, and it's a beautifully uh, uh, written book. And which something for me, again, the guy that don't see as well as he used to, is narrated by author with Abby's voice. You had me at the A and Abby on that one. So and I'm anyway. So I'll drop a reference in the link, but it came out in the last year. There's only one Abby, and there's only one Reverend Jackson. So if you're looking for a good read that also has some very important contemporary lessons about political organizing and the like, it's great for you. And it would be perhaps it would be a great gift for somebody, either hardcover, or if the audiobook, which is all I do, which is what I do. Yes, pleasure again, as always. And maybe tomorrow, if not tomorrow, then for sure on Monday. And wishing you all a beautiful and safe evening with your family. Thank you very much.